Hello, welcome to my garden here in Denmark. It's the 21st of September and this garden is located in Europe in a USDA Zone 7 equivalent. And it is looking rather lush right now. We haven't had any frost yet. As you can see right here, what makes up the majority of the show right here is Black-Eyed Susan, and I believe this one is Goldstorm. I got it from my mother, she got it from my grandmother, so I can't be entirely sure, but it does match the description though. Also making up quite a nice part of the show is this Verbena bonariensis. Some of them have made it through winter, but not a lot. Quite a lot of those that you see in the garden right now, and you can actually see them throughout the garden, is that they come from seed. And most of them generally don't make it through the winter here where I live. Sometimes none of them make it and sometimes a few make it, but the seedlings always seem to come true. Another plant that is looking really fantastic is Aster Munch. It has flopped a bit for me this year. As you can see, it should have been a little bit more upright. It has flopped out over the other plants, but given how it looks with this fantastic blue color, I can definitely forgive it. You might remember that in my last video I told you that my Cornus causa, Mr. Tommy, looked as though it had fungus, and I did prioritize to remove that one, and I drove it to the garbage disposal at the same day. And yeah, I got a little bit too afraid of what it might turn into. Even though that is an expensive plant, I decided to remove it. Helenium Moorheim Beauty. Last time we had a heavy wind, it lost all of its flowers, and I cut it a little bit back, and as you can see, it's reblooming. It is looking a little bit on the bad side, and that's because we had yet some more wind yesterday, I believe it was, and that has affected the garden a little bit, but not as much as the previous heavy winds did approximately a month ago. It was right before the previous video. There was quite a lot of wind here. I have a Jacob's ladder over here. It's supposed to be a sterile variety, so it shouldn't spread as much as Jacob's ladders sometimes tend to do. And as you can see, it is flowering. I'm not entirely sure if that is reflowering. As you can see, it has had a lot of flowers that have gone over, but also some new flowers have appeared, but I believe those might be on new shoots. I'm not entirely sure if that can be categorized as reflowering or if that is just the first flowering of some plants that might have been a little bit late. I'm not sure. We'll see next year. If it does the same again, then it's great, but it has flowered for such a long time for me this year. And last year, of course, it didn't flower at all. That was the first year I had it. Also looking good at the moment is Geranium Roseanne. Geranium Roseanne, of course, gets really large, and you should know that before you purchase it. When we arrive at autumn, it will be really huge. You can of course cut it back and it will reshoot, but that is a plant that, well, it can strangle its neighbors, but I believe that it's worth it. And here, in the way I plant, I want my borders to close up. I don't want any gaps between the plants, basically. I don't want to be able to see the soil. And yeah, primarily because I like the way that looks. Yeah, the latest winds have unfortunately affected this. I believe it's called Sanguisorba pink brushes. That was looking splendid right up to yesterday. Now it has flopped a bit, but I still think that it looks good. But as you can see, the flopping is is pretty heavy. But yeah, there was some wind yesterday, not that much, but I think it's enough to excuse that plant. It's almost as tall as I am, and it of course it will catch the wind. And a shrub, I'm actually really happy to see that one flower. When I got this one, oh, I can't remember what it's called in English. If I can translate it directly from Danish to English, it would be a Heavenly Seven Suns tree. I don't believe that's what it's called in English, though I'll try to look that up. At least I know what it's called in Danish, so I can look it up. But when I first purchased this tree, I got one, or shrub, I got a really bad specimen, and it was just one really long stem that didn't look any good, and it almost looked as if it was dying. So what I decided to do shortly after planting it was rather drastic, because I simply cut it. You can't even see the cut anymore, but I cut it right there. And yeah, at the very bottom almost, and luckily it did reshoot. Oh, camera can't focus down there, but anyhow, it did reshoot luckily, because that is actually, that should become a really nice looking plant. And the, oh, is it called a loosestrife, is finally done blooming. Drop more purple, I believe. And what I am looking forward to is how the autumn colors will look this year on that one. Because last year it turned yellow, all the leaves on it had really beautiful foliage in the autumn. So I am looking forward to seeing if it will do that again. And it has flowered for such a long time. That is definitely a plant that it is worth having. And also it doesn't seem to strangle its neighbors. Another thing that you can see is, if you remember in my last video, I told you that, oh, I've trampled this border in here totally, and I moved this, and I killed the foliage on the roseanne by planting bulbs in there, because I wiggled the roseanne from side to side, so all of its foliage was gone, and I decided to cut it back, and hence you were able to see the soil in there, but already the roseanne has closed up. That is a really good result. And I am looking forward to seeing this border over here next year. I believe it will be even better then, because I have some shrubs in there that still need to mature. Yeah, all in all, when you look at this garden, let's just see if we can just pan from up here. You'll notice a total lack of mature trees and a total lack of mature shrubs. Yeah, some trees have just grown very well, but everything in this garden is established over the last 6 years. I purchased the house 7 years ago, and I started the garden approximately 6 years ago. And I planted everything. There was a field here before me, and those that had built the house had established some grass here, but no hedge. This one is looking good. Again, I can remember the word in Danish for it, pileurt. Yeah, that probably sounds strange for everyone in English, but I will put the name up on that one. That has been looking really good here in autumn. Also, it's not the same variety as the old one from the 80s, you know, the one that took over, I think, half of Britain and quite a lot of Denmark when spreading. This one is related to it, but it's not the same one. I believe the other one was a pure Japanese version. These ones are much more well behaved. Of course, I've only had them for 1.5 years, I believe. Last year it wasn't blooming. This year it is looking really good, and I can't see any bad behavior from it. It isn't running. It doesn't appear to be running by the root. So that is really well behaved. I believe. And I researched it before I purchased it. It should be really well behaved. Right, but let's see. It's sort of the species form sort of has a really bad reputation. Magnolia, yeah, just behind all of the Verbena bonariensis, right? These are looking really good. But also present in here is a flower of Magnolia Sieboldi. And Magnolia Sieboldi, I've had it for quite a few years, as you can see. I think that one is almost 6 years old, because that is one of the plants that I did establish at the very beginning. And it is looking really good. I actually had quite a lot of trouble finding a good Magnolia Sieboldi. So quite a few of them just weren't in a good shape. But I finally found one, and what it can do is that it can give the odd flower throughout the year here in Denmark at least. And of course it has its prime flowering in spring, but not in early spring, in late spring. And the reason why I chose one that flowers, Magnolia that flowers a little bit late, is that there's always a risk of frost in spring here in Denmark. And quite often the magnolias can of course be affected by that frost. But you could say with the weathers that we've had the last couple of years, worrying about early frosts might be something that we don't have to do in the long run, right? Yeah, that is both good and bad, perhaps mostly bad, but at least for magnolias here in Denmark it might be a good thing. But let's see what we get, right? Yeah. This is Latyrus, the one that has flopped all over the place basically. It's a perennial version of a Latyrus. It doesn't have any scent. A Latyrus normally has really nice scent, right? And it looks like Latyrus sweet pea in English. But this one is a perennial version, and it has become really big. I think I did talk about that in my last video. If I go in and correct it, and yeah, it is sort of itching to do that, it will probably break up and look really bad. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wait till next year, and next year I'm gonna give it some support. And also a perennial Latyrus climbing into those shrubs over there. This is more like the effect that I wanted, right, with the white one. Yeah, the other one was the same size as this white one last year. So I think I'm gonna put in supports for both of them while at it, because otherwise I'm just gonna have the same problem next year, but with the white ones, right? Talking about a garden project, I did put in these rings, these what's it called, cotton steel rings, and I think they're gonna look really nice in there when I plant them up. I'm gonna put 3 ferns into the big one, and I don't know what I'm gonna put into the other ones. Might see if I have some plants that I can spare from somewhere, or plants that I can divide. But I think it's gonna look really good. Perhaps I should separate them a little bit more before filling them up with any kind of soil. I think I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna separate them just a little bit more. And they're gonna look nice in winter. When we get to January or February, I'll be able to see those each year. I think it's gonna look really good. Yeah, my garden fuchsia. The sole survivor of all my garden fuchsias that I got from my mother. And I am gonna cover this one up for winter again. It stays in the garden, it stays outside, but I am gonna protect it. And hopefully it will make it through another year. Finally it's starting to get some size. A sole rose in flower right here. That is looking good. With more on the way. This tree, it will become rather large, and I did not expect its neighbors to become as large as they have. Plus, I'm afraid that it's gonna shade out my hydrangea limelight. And as I told you earlier in this video, I have a Cornus causa that died on me. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna transplant this tree, to where the Cornus causa was, basically. So yeah, I'm definitely not gonna kill the tree. I'm gonna try to save it. And I think it will do really good as a solitary plant, this tree. It will become large. Oh, I can't remember the name of it, but it's something that in Danish, these have the name thorn in them. And usually these varieties can actually have thorns and be quite stingy. But this one is a specimen that has no thorns, so that's rather interesting, right? And it has a rather light foliage. I think it will, well, perhaps not right away, because it is a little bit bare on this side over here, but yeah, on this side, but I think it will correct itself. Just give that a little time. It was basically one quite ugly plant when I got it, but with just one stem and no branching at all, and only a few leaves at the stem. But the last couple of years it's been looking better and better, and I believe that it will look really good. And of course then it will be over on the other side, right? Yeah, where we were basically, right next to the Helenium Moorheim Beauty over there. And I think it will look really good as a solitary specimen right there. So I'll use it as a specimen tree. Oh, a few algae have formed in the water here, but still, I think that is a nice looking garden feature, right? And also right next to it, what are they called? They're called something wax. Can't remember. We'll put the name in. These are actually, I think these were actually a little bit better a couple of years ago. Oh, there are more flowers on the way though, right? But what I did this year was that I stabilized the water feature. And when I did that, I moved the water feature out of the bed, and I went in and I trampled around in the border, and I did dig out 3 really nice deep holes and filled those up with stones and gravel and stomped it quite heavily. But while I was doing so, I think I did trample this, yeah, yellow wax plant. Yeah, I'm gonna put in the name. Echinacea magnus has recovered a bit, but not fully. It did get rather windy a little bit over a month ago, as I told you last video, and the echinaceas just suffered under it. They are blooming again, but they are looking a little bit raggy this year. Still, it's, well, almost late in September, right? And it's still going strong, so I shouldn't really be complaining too much about that. That is still looking. I think if you can get an echinacea to grow, then you are a lucky gardener. I think that is really looking good. Echinacea magnus, of course, is one of the really easy echinaceas. I've killed quite a few echinaceas in my time, and this Echinacea magnus just performs really well for me. I've had this one for years, and also I had Echinacea magnus in 2 other small places in the garden, and I moved those to this same position because they just seem to be doing so nice right here. So instead of having one really good clump and then two smaller ones, I decided let me just have one really huge patch of echinaceas, and yeah, that is just looking really good, right? And in front of it, reblooming, is Walker Slow, and that is also looking really good. Yeah, and I got that one to rebloom by just cutting it back a bit. I think I cut it back to approximately 20 centimeters over the ground, and it was easy to see where to cut, just to get rid of some of the foliage that had withered. I did that approximately a month ago, and now I am reaping the results of that. Yeah, these Asta Munch, they are just a show, right? This one hasn't flopped on me. Yeah, I have quite a few of these, and this one hasn't flopped. Also reblooming is this Phlox. I don't know the exact variety what it is, but it's from Walter's garden, and it is looking really good. If you know the name, let me know. My Phlox did suffer a little bit in the drought that we had earlier in the year, but I did water that one. Oh yeah, and why did I water it? I watered it mainly because it's right next to this apple tree, and I did move my apple trees last fall. Hence, I'm not getting any fruit this year. I also moved the other apple tree that's sitting over there, and hence again, I'm not getting any fruit on those this year. I think they do look rather good considering that they were moved though, and they have provided extra leaves, and they have been shooting rather nicely this year. So I believe I'm gonna get fruit next year. Yeah, when you move these trees, of course you damage the roots of them on them. And just remember to water them really good throughout the year after moving them, and get as much root along as you can. Yeah, right here, as you remember, I told you I'm gonna move a tree right over here to right behind this rather nice looking Helenium Moorheim Beauty, and that tree is going to get really large. Not really large, but considering the size of the garden, it's gonna get rather large. Let's just put it like that. And this pear is just too close to it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do the same as I did with my apple trees. I'm gonna move this pear, and I'm gonna move it over there, right next to that willow leaf pear. Yeah, of course, a little bit away from it, next to this black-eyed Susan, just in front of this on the black-eyed Susan over there. And also, I think it will look rather nice to get some height in there over there. The pear is a pear that should form. It should be quite upright. Not as such. I think it's a columnar form pear. I didn't only purchase it because it's columnar, but also because it's one of the pears that should have good health. But that has been said about quite a few pears throughout the years, right? And then suddenly a disease develops that will hit it. But I am hoping that that pear will provide me with good fruit in a few years. I did save some money on that one. I didn't purchase a huge one. Again, this is looking rather good, right? Black-eyed Susan, Goldstorm, the yellow one in the background, coupled with Verbena bonariensis, looking really good. And again, coupled with a geranium. Believe this geranium is an Folkart. Yeah, rather really light, what do you call it, almost yellow leaves, and these purple flowers on a really long stem that will just continue to grow outwards. Yep, that is geranium and Folkart. Yeah, that is looking great. This rose was looking really good. Yeah, 14 days ago or so. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to see if I can edit in a picture or a video of it, because it was just looking stunning. Over here, yeah, and that is actually the same flux as I showed you next to the apple tree. And as you can see, that is not looking nearly as good. And that's because the one next to the apple tree was watered during the drought, since I was watering and taking care of my apple. And this one was neglected. I should have watered that one as well. Yeah, ignore the pile in the kitchen garden. I am gonna remove that. And the kitchen garden is a project for another day. Hopefully not in too long time, because I wanted to have a kitchen garden this year, but unfortunately I didn't make it in time. So I ended up just taking care of my main garden. But the idea is to establish 8 raised beds in there. I think it's gonna look really, really nice when I do that. At least better than that pile, right? Oh yeah, and as you remember last video, I told you that my glory bower was affected quite heavily by the wind. We had quite a strong wind right before I made my previous video, and the glory bower was looking really terrible and clearly in a position that's just too exposed for such a shrub. So what I planted in instead, I purchased a ginkgo, and this one is called Ginkgo biloba menhir, and it should be somewhat columnar in shape. And as you can see, it's sitting right in front of this kitchen garden, or the kitchen garden that's gonna be really nice looking next year, right? And and hence the kitchen garden will of course get some shade, but from approximately 1400 hours and until the sun goes down here in Denmark in summer, which is about 2200 hours. Yeah, living to the north has its privileges in summer, right? The kitchen garden should actually get quite a lot of sun. So I'm hoping that it's gonna be enough sun, even though it might look as though it's gonna get a lot of shade. And also it's sitting next to this other tree, and hence I'm really hoping that the planting description is correct, because this one shouldn't get wider than 3 meters, and hence 1.5 meter to the side, right? Shouldn't end up colliding or being a problem. But let's see. Hydrangea Pinky Winky. Finally showing why it's called Pinky Winky. This was white when it started blooming, and now it's turned pink. Looking really great. Considering that, when did I move that? Was that 2 years ago? There wasn't a grass path right here. There was a border here, but and this down here was actually a dead end. But I never. The problem with having a dead end in a garden is that I never got to walk into that dead end. Now where it's just one long winding path, I actually come to this part of the garden as well, and I think it deserves to be visited right here, this part of the garden as well. And hence the Pinky Winky had to be moved. Yeah, that is looking rather good. Oh yeah, I did make a couple of purchases that I just want to show you as well. I purchased some cyclamen. This is cyclamen coum. It's not really supposed to be flowering yet. I think perhaps they made it flower by having it in a greenhouse or something. It's supposed, usually here in Denmark, it will actually flower around, well, January or February, sometimes even in December, depending on how the year has been. And I purchased it because, as I told you earlier, I established that, oh, there are some children close by on the street. Doesn't sound like they're alarmed or anything though. Yeah, and as I told you earlier, I did establish some grass right here, and when I did so, I had quite a lot of cyclamens here. And what I actually believed was that, oh, I've probably lost quite a few of them. But yeah, of course, after I made the purchase, I found out that, well, some of them are definitely still alive. This is one of my older ones, so I did manage to they did manage to get through. So yeah, it's of course a little bit annoying to have made that purchase, but these cyclamens, yeah, and it's cyclamen coum album. Yeah, let me just check up on that. Yeah, cyclamen coum album, and the coums are really early, or what you would call them, really early flowering, January to March usually, and and they have their main leaf here in autumn and throughout winter here in Denmark. And what I really like about them is that in January to March there isn't a lot of flowering going on, and especially this album variety are found to be blooming really early. But also notice the coum, because the coums are the ones that flower early, and I believe that the other ones are called heterifolium, and cyclamen heterifolium will not flower early. It will actually flower in summer / rather late. So just remember that if you purchase cyclamen. I have both varieties, so it isn't that I don't like the heterifoliums. I just believe that the coum albums were the ones that I wiped out. But they seem to have made it. And of course I'm gonna plant these in, but to be honest, I wouldn't have made that purchase if I had known that they were still alive. So I should have checked that before purchasing anything. Oh, rather large wasp. Well, it disappeared before we were able to catch it. Thank you for the walk, and I will try to see if I can edit in that rose when it was in bloom, and perhaps also, let's see if I have a photo or video of that one, but perhaps also the rose down here, just just below the the what are they called? This might actually not be. I don't think this one is Anne Folkart. This one is Anne Thompson. Yeah, it doesn't have the. Yeah, you can basically say, why do I believe this one to be Anne Thompson? Well, first of all, I believe so because it doesn't have as light as yellow a leaf, and also this one is a little bit more clumpy. Yeah, that is hard to see on the video because there's more than one here. But I think, at least I think this one is Anne Thompson. They do look a little bit alike, but they have a bit of a different habit. Oh, and in here, this one is probably is probably the Anne Folkart. Yeah, they do have a different habit. Basically, this one will have these really long creeping stems and have a yellow leaf, and the Anne Thompson basically will be more of, at least, well, not fully, but more clump forming. Let's put it like that. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for watching, And do like the video if you want to recommend it to others. Yeah, thank you for watching. Bye bye.